Lost gaming media is fascinating. I mean, you get a dev studio together, you build a game, you release it, and then poof. Gone. No one's heard of it, no one's played it, and today I want to talk about my favorite piece of lost media known as the Bioshock phone ports. Now, to set the stage, like a decade ago when I was getting into Bioshock, there was this, let's say, urban legend, and it was said that Bioshock wasn't just released for the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, but also the flip phone. And yes, it sounded ridiculous. Some people in the community thought it was a joke, some people swore they had played the thing, but it wasn't until around 2022 that we started getting more information on it. We started seeing screenshots, gameplay, developer interviews. Turns out this urban legend was real and no one on YouTube gave a shit. Yet to my dismay, when I suddenly remembered this whole thing about a week ago, I jumped on YouTube, searched up Bioshock phone ports, and nothing. No one cares. There weren't any concise history lessons or breakdowns of the phone ports, which I was kind of surprised about considering how weird and obscure yet how well known this whole deal is. So yeah, I am instead doing it myself, and today we are going to be looking at not one, not two, but 3 different Bioshock phone ports that I have been able to dig up. Now, in order to get started, we need to jump back into 2008. The previous year, Bioshock had released and 2K was loving its success. So much so that they decided people needed to be able to experience this game on their flip phone. They needed to. And yeah, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, Bioshock is a very deep story with a very philosophical narrative and a heavily detailed world. What part of that doesn't fit into a phone game, huh? But jokes aside, 2K ordered a phone port of the game and a studio called TriDev was brought in for development. And in an interview done by IGN, TriDev studio manager Vijay Venkatramani, sorry if I butchered that, said that they were given a generous 6 months to make the port. And by the way, when I say port, I don't mean like some watered down version of the game. They wanted this on a Nokia. This, however, led to a lot of friction between TriDev and 2K because TriDev kept having to cut down on features and graphics, while 2K just wanted their quick and easy port. But it's not like they were making TriDev's job any easier, as according to Venkatramani, 2K didn't send them anything. They didn't receive code on how the gameplay worked, they didn't get design documents, and I'm also assuming they didn't get level designs either, because Venkatramani also mentions that the studio had to buy an Xbox 360 version of the game and play it over and over in order to study the game they were porting. Like, can we just take a second to appreciate how crazy that is? Anyways, it ended up taking about double the time 2K gave them, as well as what I'm assuming was a dark magic ritual, but TriDev eventually put out Bioshock 3D for Brew platforms and Bioshock 2D for Java platforms. But anyways, that was a little history lesson on the Bioshock phone ports. Both of these versions released in 2010 with the first half of the campaign, and the second half was planned to come shortly afterward. Unfortunately though, the second half was cancelled and Bioshock 3D and 2D fell into the void forever. Until now, I've spent a couple of days running around the internet, clicking on links that have a 50-50 chance to give me a virus, and I have finally pulled together a few working versions of these games. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at each game, how it's different from the base one, and just generally what I think about it. So to start, we're going to jump into Bioshock 2D, the version of the game made to run on phones that couldn't even run the already squished down Bioshock 3D. Now the game begins the same as the original, except 2D uses pixel art cutscenes. Jack's plane of course goes down, and instead of like the OG where we transition to gameplay, we only have to press a button to swim to the lighthouse, enter it, and then enter the bathysphere. Andrew Ryan then does his little speech, but like only through text, we don't actually hear him speak, and we arrive in Rapture. We then dock in the Welcome Center and see an Atlas goon die, but I gotta say, they add a lot of emotion in the 2D version. The splicer then runs away. Atlas is like, "Hey, Booyo, pick up the radio!" We're then released, and it just kind of hits you that you're playing Bioshock 2D. Like, pixel art graphics don't really age in my opinion, so this game looks crazy good. It looks like some sort of fan-made game. I can't believe this is official. We then continue forwards and grab a wrench, which like the base game leads into our first combat encounter. And let me tell you, Jack can swing in this universe. After this, Jack gets juiced up in another cutscene, and waking up, we now have access to Electro Bolt. And the crazy thing is, despite not having access to any of the code and this game having completely different controls, this feels exactly like Bioshock. It's weird. Like, there's still the zap 'em and whack 'em combo. You can find items around like cigarettes and coffee. I like that the devs understand that Bioshock isn't a game about just med kits and Eve hypos. Sometimes to get your health back, you gotta eat a sandwich out of a trash can. So continuing forward, we pass through the Kashmir restaurant and meet a big daddy who's quite efficient at his job. And after Andrew Ryan catches our scent, we flee to medical, with the biggest change being Ryan doesn't actually show up. Also, by the way, for these ports, I did go in with the mindset that I was a person that had never played Bioshock before and just didn't know the story, because I wanted to see if putting this story as complicated as Bioshock into a 2D game would still make sense, and I gotta say, I don't think it does, man. Coupled with the fact that Ryan shows up once at the start of the game and another time near the end, you're just like, oh, you know about me. Okay, you're a character. Wow, I didn't know that. There's also audio logs in the game, which are a nice little inclusion since they were in the original, but they definitely don't have the same vibe since you have to read every single line, no matter how slow it goes. Anyways, reaching the medical pavilion, the game truly opens up and we get to see what Bioshock 2D can do. And the truth is, it can pretty much do everything its big brother does. Here we learn how to hack, which, get this, the controls of the mobile version make this thing bearable. Yeah, the most universally slammed element of Bioshock is probably the mobile's best feature. But apart from that, the rest of the medical pavilion level is shockingly faithful. There's no corners cut here. I mean, even the Tommy gun is in the right spot. It feels awesome because as someone who has played the original north of 10 times, I can play this watered down version off of memory because every beat is still there in the story. It's insane, man. Now, speaking of progression, if you played the game, you know how it goes. We run around, grab Incinerate to melt this bit of ice, and then we grab Telekinesis so that we can grab this Nitro Splices bomb out of the air and use it to clear these debris. And this unblocks our path to Dr. Steinman, who is a pretty good representation of this game's difficulty level. Yeah, this thing really isn't hard, and it's something that kind of extends over to Bioshock 3D, so I will talk about it more when we cover that. But in the meantime, having the key we need to leave medical, we begin to exit when we come across a dead Big Daddy and a little sister, and this is where we meet Tenenbaum. The funny thing is that she still says, stay away or it's you who will be shot next, but there's no one there because they didn't include the scene where the splicer gets shot. What they did include, though, is the harvest or save system, and yeah, call me cynical, but I didn't think they were gonna have it in this game. You know, I thought it would take like too many kilobytes or something, but no, you can absolutely decide what happens to a little sister. And I really like how they did the animation. It looks rough, yeah, but it's also kind of stylized. Also, if you play this game, save the little sisters, man. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because they bass boosted the shit out of the little sisters, like, saying thank you voice line. It is hilarious.
Thank you.
So after this, we keep on track, heading back to the medical lobby, and on the way, we see a Big Daddy, which Atlas tells us to kill. And yeah, out of all the things that didn't translate over super well from the base game, I'd say that the threat of Big Daddies isn't there, because you can beat these guys to death with a wrench. You could not do that in the original. Which does lead me to talk about the weapons, because these things are OP. I haven't really mentioned them yet, but in the game, you get the same amount of guns you get in the first 4 levels of the original. You get the wrench, you get the pistol, you get the Tommy gun, and the grenade launcher. But really, the only strategy in using these guns is which one do I want to use most, because you get tons of ammo for all of them, and they all do crazy damage. And you know what's even more insane? You might be thinking, you know, maybe they buffed these weapons because there's not power to the people stations in this game, right? Well, you'd be wrong, because later in the game, you can find power to the people machines, and it makes it downright unfair to the splicers. It is hilarious. Personally though, I enjoy using the machine gun in this game the most just because Jack has auto aim and it feels really cool to just mow down everyone in the room. One little caveat I will put in there though is that strangely the Tommy gun looks like it was modeled off of an M16 or something instead of, you know, the machine gun from Bioshock, which it like isn't a big deal when you consider that the pistol looks like a metal pipe. But yeah, the artists in this game were doing some weird shit. I actually think the most likely case for this is probably, considering how 2K treated them, the pixel artists probably didn't know that Bioshock had special old-timey weapons. So they were just told, make a machine gun. And so they looked up machine gun on Google and then modeled it off that. Anyway, that's my game theory for the episode. Anyways, moving on to Port Neptune, I was actually more impressed with this area than the medical pavilion because they crammed a lot of detail in here. Even the dead smuggler is present. But this level is pretty straightforward. We head to Fontaine Fisheries to talk to Peach, and he says he wants some photos of leadhead splices, which is where the original and this game part ways. In the original, this is where we go and get the research camera, and we have to go around taking photos of spider splices. But in Bioshock 2D, we simply have to run around killing splicers who already have the printed photos on them. I'd say another thing of note here is that Rosies are still a part of the game. Like, wow, I definitely did not go into this thing giving it enough credit. They really keep it authentic. And just like the OG, Rosies are genuinely harder than the bouncers. But you know, it's another my M16 can't handle. And yeah, that's about it. Because of the change, this level is pretty short, but at least you get to walk through the underwater tunnels a lot, which is really cool because like this shit is pretty, man. So getting back to the fisheries with the photos, Peach and his crew try to jump us, except in this game, Peach has like 3 or 4 guys working for him, so it's super easy, and we're able to quickly find our way to the smuggler's den. Now, the next level is quite literally 3 minutes long, and yeah, that's not a huge change from the original, which was like 5 minutes long, but it's pretty clear that by this point, the devs are like, yeah, let's get this thing out the door, guys. Come on, let's release this thing. Come on. So yeah, Andrew Ryan shows up for the first real time in the game. We pull this lever, and then a bunch of splicers show up, and it does feel like by this point, the devs ran out of creative juice or something, because all game they were coming up with cool solutions for fitting a AAA game inside of a phone, but they just apparently couldn't find a way to recreate this scene, which is a little bit bizarre. Then again though, this is like a 17-year-old phone game, so who gives a shit really? Anyways, after gunning down some splicers, Atlas's family gets smithereened, and then we get a new objective to go and kill Ryan. The game then ends as we enter Arcadia, and yeah, that's it. Like I said, the second half of this whole thing got cancelled, so it's more like Bioshock 2D and 1/4. But either way, I think it's a great time. It's got the vibe of the original down. It's got a shocking amount of systems from the original. It's impressive. This is honestly a fantastic phone port. Like, yeah, the story isn't there, but who was downloading a game for their flip phone thinking they were going to have some life-changing narrative experience, huh? Anyway, this one is a W. Good stuff. Hey guys, quick little slip in here. I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, please like, subscribe, share the video, comment, all of it. One of them, literally anything helps. It allows me to get exposure and bring more people into the channel. It allows me to get money so that I can keep doing this more often than not, as well as fund epic giveaways like today's one. If you are one of the winners of today's giveaway, I hope you enjoy the game. Bioshock is peak. Back to the video. So Bioshock 3D is probably the port I'm most excited to talk about today, mostly just because with something like Bioshock 2D, it's cool, but it's a completely different visual style, while Bioshock 3D is, well, 3D. It's the same visual presentation of the original, but it looks like it's running on a PS1. I should have just said it's Bioshock PS1. Who doesn't want to play that? Now, before we get into this, I should mention that for some reason, the emulator I got this to work on doesn't support sound, so there won't be any audio for any of the clips I show off. But guys, please, trust me, I tried, okay? I spent like a week trying to get this to work on like every emulator that runs Brew platforms, and it doesn't work. So yeah, short of buying a Nokia phone, we're not gonna be getting any like 8-bit noises. So yeah, RIP, I guess. Anyway, so the game starts pretty much the same as 2D, but for some reason they use pixel art for this frame and then an in-game screenshot for this one. It's really weird. The game then follows the exact same press this button to enter the lighthouse, except this time it just says, okay, I love this. You see a lighthouse in the middle middle of the ocean and you're just like, okay. You see a slightly ajar door leading into darkness. Okay. You see a fucking private submarine. Okay. It's like Jack is just extremely unimpressed with all of this stuff, you know? But heading down to Rapture, sadly we don't get a cool low poly reveal, instead just getting the pixel art again, but docking, the real fun begins. So like the OG, this splicer kills Johnny, and with the bathysphere door opening, we step out into this beautiful retro style looking Rapture. And from this point on, the game is pretty similar, except Rose doesn't jump out at us during this point. We instead skip straight to grabbing a wrench and ascending the staircase to the main welcome center. Here, we then meet our first splicer, which... Yeah man, Jack does not mess around in the mobile versions of Bioshock. In the main version of the game, a splicer will tank more than a few hits from a wrench, but in these ports, bro is an unstoppable force. By the way, fun little rabbit hole here, Bioshock Infinite pretty much shows that every and any reality in the Bioshock universe is canon to this multiverse, as long as there's always a man, a lighthouse, and a city. Which means that technically, the changes in the mobile version aren't there because they couldn't fit what the original game had in it. It's because it's canonically another universe. Yeah, Elizabeth could open a tear and jump out into a visitor center, which looks like this. Also, once you start thinking like this, a lot of the smaller details in the game become a little more significant. Like for instance, in Bioshock 2D, Jack is dressed like he was in the cinematic trailer, which, quick side note, I've always wondered this about the trailer, but is it implied that Jack floated down to Rapture from here? Nice lung capacity, dude. Anyways, back to fashion. But then again, in Bioshock 3D, Jack is once again wearing something completely different, because as far as I can tell, bro isn't wearing a button-up or a sweater or anything, which is why I'm crowning Bioshock 3D's Jack as the canonical, most powerful Jack in the multiverse. You want to know why he can kill a guy in like 2 wrench swings? It's because he's jacked as fuck. Who needs guns? Bro already has the whole armory. Yeah, Bioshock 3D's Jack is just running around Rapture shirtless like a maniac, and all any splicer that tries to kill him sees is, "Give me your money." Anyways, as usual, Jack gets juiced, then wakes up and has wicked new electricity powers, and heading into the tunnel, we can find one of the first and probably one of my favorite compromises they have in the game. See, in the original, when you entered this tunnel, the tail of your downed plane would crash into it and you'd have to run away. Now, of course, a scripted cutscene like this would probably turn your Nokia into an explosive, so instead they had the plane already there when you pass by, which is really cool because you can tell they were seriously strapped for in-game resources here, and it's not like a ton of people would notice if the plane didn't show up, but they still decide to include it in some form. And I think that sums up a lot of what makes this game so special. They compromised without completely giving up pretty much every time. Continuing forwards though, we get to the Kashmir restaurant and kill the baby pistol woman. Funnily enough, Bioshock 3D continues the tradition of having weird looking weapons by making the revolver look like a flintlock pistol. And moving forward, we make our way through the Kashmir, meeting the Big Daddy. This is another point the 3D version excels at, by the way, because I don't know if it's just me, but these animations look really good. And that goes for all the animated cutscenes in this game. Like, I am pretty sure these animations are taken straight from the base game. And man, I cannot fathom the kind of shit they had to pull to convert these things, because these look really smooth. Like, I kept thinking they were gonna cut corners by excluding some part of this animation, but no.
Look at Randy Orton slithering. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
That's the Big Daddy. She got his Adam. He keeps her safe.
Anyways, heading to medical, Andrew Ryan once again doesn't make an appearance. I guess bro just doesn't give a shit. But you know who does give a shit? The devs when making this level, because it's crazy good. It is the weirdest feeling walking around this level, since it's pretty much one for one. Like, how did you fit this into a flip phone game? In this level, the game properly opens up and we once again get access to the Tommy gun. And just like Bioshock 2D, this thing is fucking disgusting. It just deletes enemy health bars. Once again, most canonically powerful Jack. In fact, it's not even really a joke anymore. You can absolutely walk all over the enemies in this game. And one of the reasons you can actually do this is because Jack automatically uses medkits if he runs out of health. So if you get into a fight and have like 9 medkits, you've pretty much got a health bar which looks like this. So mixing in the fact that you've got crazy good guns, auto aiming, and an insane health pool at all times, this game is really easy. Like near the end of the map, when you go to fight your first Big Daddy, you can still beat this guy with a wrench. And by the way, I am not complaining about this decade and a bit old game being too easy. This is more just an observation for comparison. You know, in the original, Jack was playing survival horror, right? But in the phone ports, the enemies are the ones playing survival horror. You do not want to run into Jack, man. There are also a few other gameplay differences, and I'm not even sure if this was on purpose, but the hacking minigame has become stupidly hard. Like, don't even try hard. The controls on this one are so bad, it's downright unplayable. The hack tool quickly became one of my most purchased items in this game because it's just way quicker and economical to skip these puzzles instead of suffering through them. Anyways, once we finish up killing Steinman, we go to leave the medical center when we run across our first little sister. And once again, a surprisingly smooth animation plays where we're given the choice to harvest or save the little sisters. And yeah, I'm still pretty surprised that this is a feature. It just seems really in-depth for a phone game, you know? Or maybe the games industry has ground down my standards over the years and now basic features seem impressive to me. Nah, corporations would never exploit it. One thing I love about this system though is that unlike the base game, this version doesn't cut the harvest or rescue scenes short, so you just get these comedically long scenes of Jack going like with his grubby little hands. So that's about all I've got to say about medical. This map is very impressive because it keeps the DNA of the original close by. Most rooms from the original still appear here, and you can't help but be impressed by the devs' commitment to the OG, since they even keep the smallest scripted cutscenes. It's just, damn man, it's impressive. This whole video is just me glazing at this point. So moving on to Port Neptune, I was pretty excited because this level is one of my favorites in the original. There is a stupid amount of stuff to find, secret passages, impactful side story stuff. I love it. And for the most part, Bioshock 3D stays very true to this level. In fact, another big W from Bioshock 3D is that they removed the Rosie. Yeah, I'm just gonna say it, I hate Rosies. I think they're a lame Big Daddy type because they're simply not as cool as the Bouncers. Bouncers are so cool and so fun to fight that it makes Rosies boring. And someone tell me I'm not alone in this opinion. I always feel like when I'm playing the original Bioshock, I'm meeting celebrity when I run into a Bouncer. But when I run into a Rosie, I just feel like the kid from The Boys who wanted to meet Translucent but got A-Train instead. I wanted to meet,
I'm looking for...
So continuing on, Port Neptune is fun. It's pretty obviously being downsized to fit on phones, but the layout remains very similar. And like usual, we go to meet Peach, who tells us to go find some photos of splices. And this is a very similar situation to Bioshock 2D. You know, the dev team were just like, who gives a shit about this camera? This is gonna be way too hard to make. And they just excluded it, which actually might be the reason the weapons are so buffed in this game, because you can't research enemies like you could in the original, which means that the only way you can buff yourself is by using power to the people stations or gatherer's garden machines. So yeah, look at that. 2 game theories for this episode. Dude, I'm doing some thinking. Now this whole photo thing once again does mean that this level is a lot shorter than usual, and you just run around killing splices till you find one with a photo, which to be fair is really fun. This is a point in the game when you already know you've only got a bit to go, so you really get a chance to let loose. You also get to travel around Rapture a little bit and see some of the creative ways that devs have optimized this level. For example, a lot of the places you find photo splices are in areas that were pretty detailed and expansive in the base game, but they've kind of just stripped them all out in this version. I think that my favorite example of optimization would definitely be the fighting McDonald's, because yeah, Bill, I don't know if this place is gonna rustle up any business, man. It's a bit basic. Pressing onwards, we return to Peach and get jumped by his crew, except We don't. Yeah, bro is in here all by himself. It's actually really strange because I'm starting to realize every time they port Bioshock, Peach has less goons. Like, can someone check the Bioshock remaster? Because I'm not even sure if Peach is going to be there at this point. Anyways, after we torch Peach, we head down to the smugglers area, and this time we actually do get a recreation of the submarine scene, which is really cool. The main differences here is that there's no spider splices this time, and instead just some guys run into the room attacking Atlas. The submarine then explodes in another surprisingly high quality cutscene, and Atlas then says, "Hey, go kill Ryan, boyo," and we exit the smuggler's hideout to enter Fort Frolic? Yeah, apparently Tridev didn't think that the Arcadia level was actually significant enough to the story to be left in, so they cut it to kind of save on time and also resources. And speaking of cuts, that's it, by the way. Bioshock 3D ends here. Although, as we know, this was meant to be a two-parter, and just a few days ago, development files for the second part were leaked with near complete levels in them. And yes, I have tried to get these files to work, but no matter what emulator I use, no matter what early 2000s drivers I download, I cannot get this thing running. Sorry, guys. But if you do want to see what Fort Frolic or Hephaestus was going to look like, I've linked a few videos down in the description, which to my knowledge are the only known pieces of footage surrounding these unreleased levels. But yeah, that's Bioshock 3D, and I'd say out of all of the ports we have talked about and are going to talk about today, this one is probably the most impressive. I mean, this was really pushing the boundaries of what phones could do back in the day. Every room you can set foot in is a testament to the skill of the people who worked on this thing. It really is incredible what they did with this thing, especially with the level of detail they managed to get out of it. I know Bioshock like the back of my hand. I have played it many a time. I could possibly play it with my eyes closed. So I've seen pretty much everything the game has to offer, and as I was walking around Bioshock 3D, I just kept thinking, when are they going to stop caring? When will they say, that's too hard, or let's just skip putting this in? But apart from instances like there being no Rosies in the game and the fighting McDonald's being nothing but a barren room, there are rarely times in this game where you will see defeat. Sure, you'll see compromises, plenty of them, but the devs set out to put Bioshock on a fucking flip phone, and they did it. And that is downright impressive. Finally, we have Bioshock iOS. In 2014, the last bits of original Bioshock content were coming out, namely the worst DLC in the franchise, Burial at Sea, but 2K decided it was time for another Bioshock phone port, this time for the iPhone 5. And this is probably one of the least interesting ports out of all of them. Like, yeah, it looks impressive, but honestly, the port is too good. It doesn't do anything interesting. It is just straight up Bioshock, through and through. Literally, the biggest change in this game is that it did not have a jump button, so they had to go through every single level and strip out obstacles you had to jump over in order to progress. That's the biggest change. So apart from that, I've got pretty much nothing to say about this thing. I also don't have a ton to talk about because you can't get this thing anymore. See, after release just 2 months later, Apple updated iOS and completely broke the game. It just didn't work. And even though they said they were going to update it to work on future devices, we never saw it again. And in 2017, 2K said, yeah, we're not gonna be supporting this thing anymore. It's like, guys, you weren't supporting it for the last 3 years, come on. So yeah, on this list of incredibly obscure and hard to get ports, it's not the fucking flip phone version I can't get a hold of, it's the newest version for the iPhone. And trust me, like everything in this video, I have tried really hard to get it working, but even though you can get the files for the app, there's just not an emulator that's on the level of the iPhone 5 yet. And the only way you could possibly play this game would be to buy an iPhone 5 that doesn't have iOS 8.4 on it, sideload the app onto it, and then pray. And look, guys, I am dedicated to the preservation of games and all their little ports, but who gives a shit, man? This port just doesn't really do anything special. If you really want the Bioshock iOS experience, just boot up the original game, put all of the graphics down to absolute minimum, and then unbind the jump button. You're welcome. In the end, it does kind of break my heart that Bioshock iOS is legitimately lost media. It's really annoying that I can play any of these ancient flip phone games, but I just have to turn into a fucking Joker goon when Apple delists an app and go, yeah, you got it, boss. I didn't want to play it anyways. But on the topic of what we can play, I've got to say that Bioshock seems to attract serious talent and passion. I mean, just the care and effort put into these things is pretty amazing. And while it doesn't quite get the original's incredible story across, the vibe is certainly there. And I'm positive that these experiences introduced at least a few people to the real deal, which is absolutely good enough for me. And look, I could gush and talk all day about how much care and effort was put into recreating this world, but I honestly think it would be easier for me to just show you. So here's a little collection of comparisons I've put against the OG, the demake, and the other demake. Man, that was beautiful. Anyways, wrapping it up, Bioshock's phone ports are very impressive for the time and like even today. Like rebuilding a game from the ground up just to work on a device that was 100% not made to run it isn't really something you would see these days. Like sure, we've got stuff like Call of Duty Mobile, but those are funded by the idea that you can shove tons of microtransactions into them. It's kind of worth the hassle. Bioshock, on the other hand, we might never see anything like that again because, oh, holy shit, they just announced a new Bioshock phone port. Let's check it out. Damn, man, this thing looks good. Wow, I am actually eating my words right now. They actually did it. Oh, come on.